All right, so Mayor Adams in New York City taking questions there on his ambitious plan to address what he called the sea of violence engulfing the nation's largest city. It sounds familiar to a lot of us in other cities because the nation is certainly facing a significant crime wave. Mayor Adams had outlined a very ambitious agenda for toughening enforcement of laws, for putting more boots on the ground, for addressing some of the social problems behind the violence. And so for more, let's bring in once again former NYPD Chief Detectives Robert Boyce, former FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett, both ABC News contributors, and ABC News senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky. He's live on the scene there. Aaron, first, tell us a little bit about what triggered this move by Mayor Adams. He said he came into office knowing that public safety would be a high priority. But he moved at this moment with this high-profile press conference and statement and program after the shooting of a police officer in Harlem a couple of days ago. Tell us about that, where that investigation is, and what this response looks like on the ground there.
Terry, this happened on Friday evening when police officers made what's often a dangerous run, and that is a domestic violence call. They had answered a 911 call from a mother who said she was having trouble with her adult son. The officers responded. A officer who'd been on the force a little under 4 years and a rookie officer, along with another rookie officer. They ended up on the scene and shots were fired. The rookie officer, just 22 years old, was shot and killed, Officer Jason Rivera, and the other officer he was with in that hallway in Harlem was shot and gravely wounded. The suspect, 47-year-old LaShawn McNeil, we've just learned has died of injuries that he sustained when an officer who was just 8 months on the force opened fire and prevented, his comrades say, anybody else from getting hurt in this. But this spate of gun violence that has now taken the life of a police officer and caused 5 officers just this month to get shot on the line of duty prompted the mayor to act now. And he outlined a plan that we know he'd been thinking about since his days campaigning for office, but one that he found to be urgently needed now in the city. The centerpiece is bringing back some plainclothes police units that had been disbanded under the prior city administration. They're going to be going into the 30 precincts where the violence has been highest, and they are going to try and take yet more guns off the street. But the mayor also noted, Terry, that there is a seemingly endless supply coming in from other parts of the country.
And thank you, Aaron. An endless supply of weapons streaming into New York City. But also, Brad Garrett, as we were talking before, the mayor was taking questions there, a deep reservoir of some urge, some violent eruption in the American character. Crime across the country is shooting up in very, very frightening ways to people in many, many communities. What's that attributable to? Is it the economic hardship of the pandemic? Is it something else? How do you read the causes of this wave of violence that is a problem for mayors across the country and increasingly for the President of the United States as people look for answers?
So, Terry, it's all of what you just mentioned, but it becomes quite complex. I mean, if you look at police departments across the board, COVID took a number of officers and detectives off the street. All of the issues that we've had with high-profile police shootings or people dying in police custody, obviously George Floyd, things like that, have both soured the public, who obviously reports crimes to the police, and then the police themselves in some jurisdictions not being as aggressive. Again, some of that may have been because of COVID, the fear of catching COVID. But I think all of these things become cumulative after a period of time. And I think that's why we've gotten to the place that we have in places like New York, and I could name off at least a dozen other cities that have similar problems: higher gun flow, less guns seized, and career-type criminals or people that use violence to run their businesses have not been aggressively gone after like they were in the past. So you combine all of those things and you end up with where we are today. And it's going to take us a while to catch back up. And the other side of this, of course, is New York is unique in that the NYPD is unique in that it's big, and it has access to potentially, I guess, a lot of money, and that's not the case in many cities across the country that are just trying to keep enough officers on the street to patrol the streets. In other words, they're still in a reactive mode. So there's a reality check here as you move from city to city.
And that, for sure, is a problem. I want to pick up on something that Brad just said with Bob Boyce in New York, former New York City chief of detectives for the NYPD. And Bob, the notion that there is something that happened during the pandemic and the uprising around the killing of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, that changed the dynamic, maybe the morale, you might say, within police forces, certainly some of the politics around policing, and also maybe the relations between police and community. How big of an issue has that been? And do you think that as Brad suggests, is one of the drivers of the violence that we're seeing?
Certainly it is when you have a failure of morale, which is what it happens. We're asking these young men and women to go out and risk their lives daily, and depending where you work, sometimes hourly. So we should have their back. And when they feel they don't have their back, they're going to operate a little bit differently. So that could be it could be a cause. But as Brad says, it's complex. It's not easily answered. I will tell you the reform, criminal justice reform, has played a role in it, and we don't see the prosecutions we have. But this anti-gun strategy has to be a two-prong in its heart. We have to have the plainclothes officers. We have to have the prosecution of those arrested for guns. And Mayor Adams took a question about those under 18. It's important to raise the age. We should have raised the age, but we have to do so intelligently. Additionally, we had the Senate Majority Leader. It's from New York, by the way. We should have some help in Washington with these things. Go after the straw buyers. And you can do that by the NICS checks, the National Information Crime Check. First question is, are you buying this gun for yourself? You fail that first question, you have to be tracked at that point. So that's one of the things you can do. Otherwise, take stolen guns that show up in New York from another state, federal prosecution, move them to the Southern District and the Eastern District, and you'll see real change. That has to happen. Lastly, he's going to have the weekly meetings with the district attorneys. You have Deputy Mayor Phil Banks. He well knows CompStat. He should be CompStatting these DA's offices, what they're doing with their cases, triaging them, moving them forward. What do they need from us? What kind of evidence? Do they need more? Do they need social media testimony? Whatever the case may be, they need to get that. So again, it's a broad plan, but I think this is a complex situation. It calls for a lot of money, a lot of needs. Other cities may not have that, as Brad said.
Absolutely, but New York does. Thanks, Bob. And Aaron, let me go to that. Finally, it seems like Mayor Adams, as you suggested, was ready for this challenge. He is a former police officer. Tell us about that background and what this means for him as the new leader of the city, taking over in a moment of what he describes as crisis with this kind of program, broad-based, multi-pronged, expensive, aggressive, to try to address it.
And he may be the one that New York City voters decided can speak to all of the stakeholders, as a former police officer, as a person of color, as somebody who may have the credibility to tell the police how to change their behavior, but also to tell certain neighborhoods to expect more officers, because that's where the violence is occurring. So the hope is that he has the juice to take this on. It is an ambitious plan, though, and he had suggestions for the prosecutors, for the district attorneys, not all of whom are necessarily on board with some of the policies he laid out, including the newly elected district attorney in Manhattan, who has said that juvenile offenders should remain in family court and not brought to criminal court, as the mayor has called for, who've said that there should be fewer prosecutions of certain kinds of crime. So that's seemingly at odds. Terry, the mayor, though, is, I think, getting credit early on for at least taking this on in such a big way. He is not shying from any of these challenges. His ideas are not radical. They are not necessarily new, but they are packaged together in a way that he believes could make a real difference if enacted together. But it's a big if, because so much of what he proposes is out of his control.
As Bob Boyce said, talk of defunding the police in New York City, at least, is over. And we'll see how Mayor Adams gets on with that program. in this crisis. Aaron Katursky, Bob Boyce, Brad Garrett, thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.